The 2:15 a.m. train rattled through the tunnels as I collapsed into a seat, exhausted from a double shift. My apron still smelled of whiskey. Police had swarmed the Exchange Place platform earlier. Another missing person. Third this month. No follow-ups. 3 passengers. A businesswoman slumped against the window, motionless. A teen nodding to music, but his severed headphone cord dangled loose. And him. An older man in a gray coat, blending into the shadows. Eyes locked on mine, never blinking. I checked my phone, 2:17 a.m. The train lurched forward, and I pressed myself deeper into the plastic seat, pretending to be absorbed in my screen. When I glanced up again, he was 4 seats closer. My heart stuttered. I hadn't seen him move, hadn't heard footsteps. The businesswoman's reflection in the window showed empty eyes, like holes punched in paper. The teenager's head still bobbed, perfectly rhythmic, like a metronome. He hadn't changed his timing in the last 10 minutes. Not even a fraction of a second. My phone displayed. That couldn't be right. We were moving forward, but time was running backward. I looked down at my hands, counting my fingers, a childhood habit for calming nerves. When I raised my eyes again, he was halfway down the car, still staring, still unmoving. His face seemed smoother now, almost like wax. Exchange Place, next stop, the automated voice announced. Wrong. Exchange Place was in the opposite direction. I'd overheard the station guards talking once about how that announcement sometimes played on trains that never went near Exchange Place. One of them had said his grandfather used to work there in the 60s, back when they'd first sealed off the lower platform. He never said why they sealed it. The lights flickered, and he was 3 seats away. The other passengers were gone. Had they left at the last station? What station was that? My mouth went dry as I realized I couldn't remember. My phone's display flickered between numbers that shouldn't exist. 13, 88, 215, 00060, 2 seats away. His eyes were black holes in a face that no longer looked quite human. The windows showed only darkness now, not even the usual blur of tunnel lights. Except, were they windows anymore? Each time I looked away and back, they seemed longer, stretching impossibly tall, yet the train car hadn't changed size. Sometimes they appeared to be on the wrong side of the car. Once, I saw my own back through one of them, sitting in the exact position I was in now, wearing that same gray coat I'd seen him in. My phone displayed times in reverse, the digits flowing backward like water up a drain. 1 seat away. My fingers trembled as I reached for the emergency call button. It crumbled under my touch like ancient paper. Empty seat. The train screeched to a halt at my stop. As I ran out onto the platform, my legs shaking, a security guard caught my arm. "Miss, are you all right? You were talking to yourself the whole ride." I turned back to look at the security monitor mounted on the wall. There I was, alone in the car, gesturing and recoiling from nothing. Except, behind my seat, a dark figure stood perfectly still, its head inclined toward my neck, close enough to whisper. The security footage haunted my dreams. I had watched it 17 times by then, each viewing worse than the last. The guard had sent it to my phone after I broke down sobbing in the station. He probably thought it would help, prove I was just tired, imagining things. Instead, it showed me the truth. My screen flickered as I watched it again. There I was, talking to an empty seat, my face contorted with fear, and there it was, that thing, standing behind me. Its form seemed to shift between frames, like smoke given shape. In some frames, it was tall enough to brush the ceiling. In others, I T-hunched, its face always turned toward my neck, but there was something else in the footage. Someone had written on the train wall behind me, "It takes you to the exchange." The graffiti appeared in every frame, but each time in a different handwriting. Some looked decades old, others fresh. In one frame, I recognized my own handwriting, though I knew I hadn't written it. Yet, I hadn't taken the subway since that night. 3 weeks of expensive rideshares had drained my savings, but I couldn't go back underground. My manager at the bar kept asking why I wouldn't work closing shifts anymore. He didn't know that his last closing bartender had vanished on her way home, last seen on the Exchange Place platform. The security footage from that night had been corrupted, just static and strange shadows. The thing was, I wasn't sure it mattered, because by then, I saw it everywhere. It started small. A shadow in my bathroom mirror that didn't match my movements. A dark shape in my peripheral vision when I checked my blind spot while driving. The sense of breath on my neck in an empty apartment. My phone showed impossible times again. 3:33 a.m. when it should have been noon. 4:44 p.m. in the middle of the night. Sometimes text messages arrived from my own number, empty, except for timestamps that hadn't happened yet. At the coffee shop, I noticed the man next to me staring at his phone with a trembling hand. The time on his screen read 25:61, the same impossible hour I'd seen on the train. When I tapped his shoulder and pointed to it, he looked at me with glassy eyes and said, "Beautiful weather we're having," though it had been storming for days. He kept repeating it, his smile too wide, while his phone flickered through times that couldn't exist. In the grocery store, I saw a teenage girl showing her friend her phone, giggling about something. The friend's face went slack when she saw the screen, but she kept laughing, a mechanical sound like a broken music box. Later, I saw that same friend walking past the store window over and over, wearing the same clothes, making the same gestures, checking her phone at exactly the same spot. She passed by 17 times before I stopped counting. My coworker Rita was always checking her phone during shifts now. One night I glimpsed it showing 13:88 a.m. "Rita," I said, "your phone's doing it too?" She turned to me with that same vacant smile I'd seen on the coffee shop man. "I don't have a phone," she said, even as she held it in her hand, even as impossible numbers flickered across its screen. The next day she acted like we'd never had the conversation, but sometimes I caught her counting her fingers under the bar. One night, I finally worked up the courage to take a selfie, to prove to myself I was being paranoid. In the photo, I smiled nervously at the camera, and behind me, a gray-coated figure stood so close its featureless face touched my hair. The timestamp read, "Tomorrow." When I zoomed in on the photo, I noticed something in the background, a bulletin board I'd never seen in my apartment. It was covered with missing person posters, each photo showing someone wearing that same gray coat, each face increasingly blurred with time. The most recent photo showed an empty coat. The next space on the board was blank, waiting. The next morning, that same bulletin board was on my wall, though I know it hadn't been there before. The blank space now held a clear photo, my driver's license picture from 3 years ago. As I stared at it, the image began to blur. I started counting my fingers obsessively then, the way I had on the train. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a ritual to stay grounded. But that morning, while counting, I noticed something. In the mirror, my reflection's hands had 6 fingers. When I turned to look at my real hands, they were normal, 5 fingers. But in my peripheral vision, I saw 7. When I tried to count them directly again, the numbers shifted between counts. 5, 8, 3, 6. Each finger cast multiple shadows, all moving slightly out of sync. The bathroom mirror wasn't rectangular anymore. Its edges curved inward when I looked directly at them. But in my peripheral vision, they reached out into spirals that shouldn't fit in the wall. Sometimes I caught glimpses of other faces in it, countless people, all wearing the same gray coat, all counting their fingers with increasing desperation. All of them had been me, or would be me, or were me in places where time moved differently. On my way to work, I saw a man in a business suit, standing perfectly still on the corner. His lips moved silently as he stared at his hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When he looked up and saw me watching, his eyes went wide with recognition. He opened his mouth as if to call out, but then his gaze shifted to something behind me, and he ran. In the break room at work, I caught my coworker Sarah counting under her breath. Our eyes met in the mirror above the sink. She had the same haunted look I saw in my own reflection every morning. Before I could speak, she turned and walked out. She never came back to work. Sometimes I see her on missing person posters, but in every photo, her hands are blurred. Now, alone in my apartment, I hear the subway voice, "Exchange Place, next stop." But that station was shut down years ago. My reflection won't mirror me. My phone is stuck at 5 a.m. I force myself to look away from the window, from the thing wearing my face. I grab my coat, my keys, I have to leave. But as I reach for the door, my fingers hesitate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A breath brushes my ear. You're finally seeing it. The lights flicker, the subway chime echoes through the room, and when the darkness settles, I am no longer alone. Moral of the story is, traveling by train can take you to unknown destinations, but some journeys lead to more than just a place. They uncover forgotten horrors,